This is the original podcast edition of The Guild of the Cowry Catchers by Abigail Hilton, now part of the complete Pirates of Wefrevane series. The books are available as audiobooks, ebooks, and paperbacks. This podcast originally aired from 2010 to 2014. Stick around after the story for commentary from me, the author, more than a decade later.
Quarantine. Sir? The voice sounded weak, wrong. Basil opened his eyes. Oh, gods. He tried to sit up. Tried twice. Worst hangover ever. His steward was standing by the bed, gripping the frame. He looked dead pale. Sir, he said again. Yes, croaked Basil. There's a disturbance on deck. Thought you might want to. Basil cleared his sandpaper throat and forced himself up and over the side of the bed. His cabin spun. I'll deal with it. His steward limped away without another word. Basil tried to dress. Pants, yes. Shirt, yes. Buttons, not essential. Boots, definitely not. He opened the door and staggered down the short passage, up the stairs into blinding sunlight. Is it really noon? When did that happen? The light was horrible. He looked around, squinting like a bat, feeling as though his brain would explode and begin leaking out his ears at any moment. They were anchored just off Ollers Bay, a tiny Channel Island settlement whose chief export seemed to be goats. Basil could smell them from here. Half a dozen sailors clustered near the port side railing. Basil was pretty sure they were the only able bodies left aboard. They were all hunty, and they were speaking quickly in their native language, occasionally shouting at something in the water on that side of the ship. Basil took his time crossing the deck. He'd been raised on ships, and it was damned embarrassing to be seen staggering like a landlubber. Fortunately, no one was looking at him. As he got closer, he saw something small and colorful crouching against the bulwark. It looked like a kid, wearing some kind of party clothes. Foxling, he realized. A white one with a froth of tail. He was wearing a pale pink shirt with a bewildering number of ruffles, charcoal gray trousers, and dainty boots trimmed in pink fur. Basil blinked hard. And now I'm hallucinating. But the kid did not disappear. He looked up as Basil reached the railing, and his eyes, they were the most startling shade of pale blue Basil had ever seen. The kid was wearing coal, and it made the pale irises shine like gems, like nothing that should exist in nature. Sir, said his bosun beside him, these Krishnards want to come aboard. We keep telling them they can't, but they won't listen. Basil did not look up. What about him? Lasley glanced at the foxling. He showed up on a Pegasus a few moments ago, dock rat from the port, hoping to earn a few cowries, I imagine. We tried to warn him off, but the beast just dumped him and flew away. I figure that's damage done, but these others... Basil raised his pounding head and saw the two small boats, each carrying half a dozen unfriendly-looking Krishnards. They had the appearance of law enforcement. His crew had been trying to fend them off with boat hooks. One Krishnard had drawn a sword. Things were about to get ugly. In spite of his burning throat and knife-like headache, Basil felt a degree of pleasure as he leaned against the railing in his open shirt, tangled blonde curls blowing in the wind, and called down, Can I help you, officer? A big Krishnard stood up in one of the boats and shouted back, I am the commander of Port Ollers Sea Watch. Your ship is not properly identified. I demand to know her name and to speak with your captain. Put down your boat hooks and let us board. I am the captain, said Basil. This is the Nightingale. We're a letter of marque from CERN, just come from Medent. I'm afraid I can't let you board, though. The officer, who was already flushed with anger, looked ready to explode.
"You will let us board, sir. We are pursuing a fugitive, a white foxling who is seen to land on your deck. You will let us board, or we will return with griffins and marines."
"What's he saying?" whispered Leslie. Basil shook his head. To the police officers he called, "You'll have to excuse my crew. Most of them don't speak Grishnard. Who are you again?"
"Ola's Sea Watch,"
grated the commander, and made an impatient motion for his rowers to close the distance to the side of the ship. "Don't let them do that," muttered Basil to his crew, who obediently applied their boat hooks.
"I warn you," said the lead officer in the boat, "if you persist, we will claim your entire ship. You'll lose your commission. I'll make certain of it. We are very serious. Hand over the foxling, or prepare for search and seizure."
The kid was still crouching at Basil's feet, pressed against the bulwark. Basil could feel the soft brush of fluffy tail against his pant leg.
"You're mistaken,"
he told the Grishnards.
"No foxlings here. I'm sure I would have noticed. Now get on back to your goats." "Very well," snarled their leader. "We'll be back with griffins."
"No, I don't think you will," said Basil.
"And why is that, pirate?"
Basil leaned over the rail, rolled up his sleeve, and shook his bare arm at them, splotchy with a telling rash.
"Because we've got jungle plague, you stupid goat fuckers. Why do you think there's no one on watch who speaks Grishnard? There are no fugitives here, only very sick hunty. But if you really want to come aboard, by all means climb up here. I'll give you a hello kiss."
Basil thought the resulting show was almost worth dying of plague. Color drained from the commander's face. He started to say something, and then the rowers began back-paddling of their own accord. Their leader went down with an undignified flail as he lost his balance and nearly fell out of the boat. There was an interval of confusion while the commander struggled to regain control of his frightened subordinates. At a much greater distance, he called,
"Send out the foxling. Send him out, and we'll send in supplies. Food, water, medicine, possibly even a healer, or at least some fawn slaves to attend you. If you don't send him out, we'll leave you to rot." "Do you prefer the male goats or the females?" called Basil. "You can send over whichever you don't prefer. We're not picky."
From somewhere near his feet, Basil heard a faint snort of laughter. The commander fumed. Then he started shouting at his subordinates, and they rowed away at speed. Basil allowed himself a short, painful chuckle. Leslie looked worried.
"They'll quarantine us now."
"They would have done that anyway," muttered Basil. "How are you?" For answer, his bosun rolled up his sleeve. The blotches ran all the way into his armpit. Basil sighed. "Prepare as much food as possible and open the water barrels. We're going to be too sick to cook." "Too sick to crawl to the galley, more likely. But never let it be said that the Nightingale went down without a fight."
"Do you still need me?"
came a voice from his feet. Basil turned to see the foxling, cautiously standing, peering over the gunwale towards the retreating rowboats. In spite of his blurring vision and the increasing agony in his throat, Basil noticed again how absurdly pretty the kid was, a face that any girl would have envied, and fine pale hair that caught the light like a halo. "I think you're clear," said Basil. "Can you get your Pegasus back?" The kid turned to stare at him.
"You don't need me, then?"
Basil was confused.
"You hired me."
Oh. He had hired someone at the apothecary the day before, an expert in poison, they'd told him. "I thought you'd be older," he said stupidly. The kid raised a perfect, silky eyebrow. "As it turns out," continued Basil, "we are not poisoned, but dying of plague. I didn't realize. My crew just went down so fast." He was beginning to feel really bad about the kid.
"If you get out of here quick, you might be all right."
He hesitated.
"We had a griffin, but she was the first to die. I think she might have brought the disease, hunting in the jungle. You could take one of our small boats."
He realized an instant later how foolish it was to suggest that this tiny creature row a boat alone. Basil leaned against the railing.
"I'm not thinking clearly." "All right, here's what you do. Go down to the hold where my bosun is opening the water barrels. Take as much water as you can carry from one of the newly opened barrels. That should be safe. Do you have any food with you? If not, try to get some cured meat from a barrel that hasn't been opened. Take it up to the main top and stay there for 5 or 6 days. Should be the safest place on the ship. Clean air, and I'll tell everyone to stay away from you. Danger should be mostly past in a few days. You can come down, and whoever's left alive can row you ashore. Surely the Sea Watch will have forgotten about you by then."
Basil felt as though his own voice were echoing inside his head. He slithered down to sit against the bulwark of the ship.
"Dying on deck might not be so bad."
The light that had felt brutal a moment ago now gave him some comfort as chills washed over him. The planks felt warm against his shivering skin. When he opened his eyes, the slant of the light had changed.
"Can I really have fallen asleep?"
No one had come to get him. In fact, the only sailor he could see was prostrate on deck a short distance away.
Dead?
The foxling, however, was sitting beside him, leaning against the bulwark and watching the sky. When he saw that Basil was awake, he said, "You're not a hunty."
"No."
Basil's tongue felt tacky in his dry throat.
"Just adopted. You really should go."
The foxling drew his knees up to his chin and wrapped his skinny arms and fluffy tail around them. "No, I really shouldn't." Basil remembered 2 boats full of armed Grishnards looking for one teenaged foxling.
"What did you do? Bed the Magister's daughter?"
Basil reconsidered.
"His son? Did you steal his wallet on the way out?"
The foxling gave a thin smile. "Something like that." He hesitated. "I once had plague when I was little." Basil snorted.
"When you were little? So, last year?"
The foxling laughed. His pale blue eyes turned into points of light and mischief. Basil heard himself say,
"God, you're pretty."
Normally he would have felt mortified to have said it aloud, but now he felt giddy and hollow and completely beyond embarrassment. The foxling didn't react, just looked at Basil with his head on one side.
"I suppose you get that all the time," said Basil stupidly. "I think I'm about to start vomiting blood. Maybe you should find somewhere else to sit."
He did vomit, but it wasn't blood. Not yet.
"I suppose that's the last phase. Something to look forward to."
He was so weak now that he might have just laid there in his own filth, but the foxling got hold of his hands and dragged him to his feet. "Come on. Where's your cabin?" Basil swayed.
"I'd rather die on deck. Look at all the colors in the sky."
"You're hallucinating," said the foxling. "Come on. You must have a bed somewhere. Are you really the captain?"
"Yes."
"Then I bet your cabin is in the stern."
"Look, kid, just because you've had plague once, that's not a guarantee."
The foxling sounded impatient. "I'm not a kid. My name's Sylvie. I'll take my chances. If you're the captain, then act like it." Basil followed the foxling, mesmerized by his plume of tail, narrow hips, and the bouncing pink frills of his collar and cuffs.
"Are you a whore?"
he heard himself ask.
"The crew think you're a whore."
"Sometimes," said Sylvie over his shoulder.
"I'm not good with whores,"
Basil slurred as they reached his door. Sylvie turned to him with a long-suffering expression.
"What's there to be good at?"
Basil realized he was going to fall over, and caught himself on the frame.
"Oh, you'd be surprised."
His voice was echoing inside his skull again.
"Gods, I'm sorry. This isn't me. This isn't how I talk to people I've just met. Not how I talk to kids."
Sylvie caught his hand and dragged him through the door.
"I'm not a kid. I'm a whore, remember? And you're hallucinating. You feel hot as an oven."
Sylvie paused to look around the roomy stern cabin with its broad window, feather rugs, and plush chairs.
"Nice. Now that is a bed."
Basil had inherited the enormous bed from the Nightingale's previous owner, who'd been a large mountain Grishnard. He'd considered replacing it to make more space, but the cabin was already large, and he'd never quite gotten around to it. He babbled all this, together with random irrelevant details of the ship's history, as Sylvie more or less poured him between the sheets. Basil lay there, sweating, shivering, and feeling as though his limbs were made of lead.
"This is not how I thought I would die."
He sank into unconsciousness. An indeterminate amount of time later, someone shook him awake. The foxling was holding a mug of water to his lips. Basil drank, too weak to hold it himself.
"Now this,"
said Sylvie. He pressed a teacup of something bitter-smelling under Basil's nose. Basil drank it obediently.
"What is it?"
"Herbs to bring down your fever. You have a well-stocked medicine cabinet. Your healer is too sick to move, but you have good stuff." Basil squinted at him. The foxling seemed to glow in the dim evening light of the unlit room.
"You are so pretty."
"You've said that."
"Sorry."
He floated in and out of consciousness as Sylvie came and went, poked through his dresser, examined the contents of his closet, leafed through his account book. "You're not a very exciting pirate, are you?" Basil laughed, or thought he did. He might have just croaked. Sylvie put a hand to his forehead again. "Fever's breaking. You'll feel better for a little bit, and we're going to get you cleaned up and a few mouthfuls of broth in your stomach. The fever will come in waves, so we need to act fast. I've dragged out your tub and a few scoops of bath water. Come on, move." Basil tottered up. Sylvie was undressing him with expert indifference.
"You don't have to do this,"
began Basil. "I know," snapped the foxling. "Get in the tub. Come on. I need to go check on the rest of your crew. I left them in various states of half clean and half fed." Basil stared at him.
"Thank you,"
he whispered. Then his knees unhinged, and he sank into the tub. Sylvie bent and kissed him on the forehead, as though Basil was the child. "You saved my life," he murmured. "Now I'm going to save yours." Author's note. Silvio and Basil are characters who appear first in the Guild of the Cowry Catchers series, and later in the second book of the Refugees trilogy. In Quarantine, Basil is 30 years old, and Silvio is 15. The story takes place a few months before the events in Chemistry, from the previous short story collection, Secret Things.
And I'm back. This is 2026 Abby, coming to you with a few thoughts on the story. So obviously Rish did not attempt to give Basil Dan Sawyer's voice for this, but he did give Silvio Norm Sherman's voice. I think Rish does a passable young Norm Sherman, because that's what he's trying to do here. We agreed on a vaguely Indian accent for the Hunty, and I'm sorry I can't reconstruct that thought process now, but we agreed on that, and so I think the thought here was to give Basil a little bit of a Hunty accent. For the people who listened to this when the books were coming out, it had been years in between Cowry Catchers and this story. I would imagine it's a little bit more jarring for you guys who are coming straight across, maybe within days of finishing Cowry Catchers, but this series was produced over decades, it was written over decades, and so there are some artistic choices there made when you change narrators. Hopefully the change was not too jarring. So this is how Silvio met Basil. There is quite an age gap between these characters. There is no claim that this is a healthy relationship, but throughout their whole lives there has been quite a bit of role reversal, wherein, in spite of the fact that Basil is older, Silvio is often taking charge, and that happens here in this very first scene where they meet, where Silvio comes in, assesses the situation, and decides he is going to rescue Basil and his crew. And like so many things that Silvio does, this is an act of mercy, but it is also very self-serving, right? Because he senses he could get a lot of use out of these people. And he does. But I'm still happy with the way this story nails down their initial dynamic. You can see the characters becoming the people that they will be in the Guild of the Cowry Catchers. You can see some of Basil's humor when it is not made cartoonish with substance abuse. You can see kind of who he is at baseline without that dysfunctional overlay, and who he is getting back to, we would hope, at this real-time point in the Cowry Catchers saga. This story was written in 2016. It was one of the many Patreon short stories that I wrote as people voted on different characters. It was actually written in the midst of writing Jaeger Thunder, which is the fourth big chunky novel in this saga. It was written towards the end of Jaeger Thunder, so I wrote this story in February of 2016, and about 2.5 months later I finished Jaeger Thunder. So I had a very good idea of where these characters were going to end up, where they were going at that point in time when I wrote this story. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Basil and Silvio always have quite a bit of crude humor. I hope it made you laugh, and I will see you in the next episode for a short story about Lou, and also Silvio, and also Basil. Talk to you later. This is Abigail Hilton, and you have been listening to the Pirates of Wefravain saga. Join me on Patreon for early episodes, long-form interviews, forum access, personal updates, and lots of artwork, including maps and species charts. That's patreon.com/Abigail Hilton. If you want the whole story now with no interruptions and some remastering of the early books for sound quality, you can find the entire series at shop.abigailhilton.com, along with all my other novels. The audiobooks are delivered by BookFunnel. Background music was Hidden Sky by Jamie Sieber, licensed from Magnatune.net circa 2014. The Guild of the Cowry Catchers podcast is an audio adaptation of the Pirates of Wefravain saga, written and produced by Abigail Hilton. Original production copyright 2010. All rights are reserved to the author.